The studio lights were bright, casting a warm glow over the set of The View. It was one of those mornings when everything seemed ordinary, hosts chatting about everyday topics, laughter floating through the air, and the audience settling into their seats with cups of coffee in hand. Everyone expected a normal, lighthearted episode. After all, television shows like this were meant to entertain, inform, and provide a little escape from the busy day. But that morning, something extraordinary was about to happen. And no one in the studio or at home would see it coming. The guests for the day were two of the most famous actors in Hollywood, legends who had spent decades captivating audiences around the world. One was known for his quiet, strong presence and a career full of iconic roles that seemed to define toughness and resilience. The other had a reputation for intensity, for deep emotion, and for being unafraid to speak his mind, whether it was on screen or in real life. Both had earned respect and admiration, but they were also very different in personality. People often wondered what would happen if these two great talents ever sat down together to talk. And now, that question was about to be answered live on television. As the camera panned to the audience, the excitement in the air was palpable. Many viewers at home probably didn't realize how unusual this pairing was. These weren't just two actors coming together to promote a movie, they were two icons, each carrying decades of experience, strong opinions, and very different worldviews. The audience in the studio sat forward in their seats, smiling, applauding politely, and waiting for the conversation to begin. The host greeted them warmly, inviting them to sit and chat, their voices calm and friendly, the kind that makes guests feel at ease. At first, everything seemed normal. The actors exchanged smiles and brief greetings, their charm and professionalism shining through. The audience clapped, some whistled softly, others laughed lightly at the host's easy jokes. The discussion began on safe ground movies, roles, and the art of acting. The hosts asked about memorable experiences, favorite characters, and behind-the-scenes stories that only someone with decades in the business could know. Both guests answered with anecdotes, sharing small, amusing moments from their careers. The audience leaned in, captivated by tales that seemed almost too incredible to be true. Stories of long shoots, demanding directors, and unexpected challenges that required creativity and courage. But as the conversation went on, subtle differences began to emerge. One actor spoke in calm, measured tones, thoughtful pauses between sentences like someone weighing every word carefully. The other's voice was passionate, quick and sharp, carrying emotion that could fill a room even without raising volume. At first, the differences were hardly noticeable, just a contrast in style. But soon, the contrast became the focal point of the discussion. The topic shifted, and what had begun as casual chat slowly edged toward deeper issues, personal perspectives and opinions that didn't always align. The hosts, ever the professionals, tried to keep things light and entertaining. They asked questions about the actors' inspirations, the challenges of staying relevant in Hollywood, and their approach to new projects. But sometimes, even the most skilled hosts can't prevent tension from surfacing when two strong personalities meet. One guest would make a point, calm and direct, and the other would respond with a subtle edge, hinting at disagreement. It wasn't aggressive, at least not at first, but it was noticeable. The audience, at first relaxed and smiling, began to sense that something more intense was developing. Small shifts in posture, a raised eyebrow, a slightly tense jaw, they were subtle, but to those paying attention, they were signals that the conversation was becoming charged. And then came a moment that made it clear. This was no ordinary talk show appearance. One actor shared a story, a memory from years ago, framed with humor and humility. The other listened, nodding at first, then interjected with a comment that was polite on the surface, but carried an unmistakable firmness. The host tried to steer the discussion back to safer territory, suggesting lighter topics, but the conversation refused to stay simple. The actors were both seasoned, both used to commanding attention, and neither was willing to let the other dominate entirely. What had begun as a friendly exchange was evolving into something rare, an authentic, unscripted clash of ideas and perspectives between two legends. For the audience, the change was subtle at first. Some laughed nervously at the host's attempts to redirect the conversation. Some leaned closer, curious to see where it would go. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that anything could happen. Television audiences are used to polished, rehearsed moments. They expect smiles, jokes, and carefully curated sound bites. But this felt different, it felt real. And there is a unique kind of fascination that comes with watching two people who are confident, experienced, and unafraid collide intellectually, even if no one gets hurt physically. It's a reminder that even icons are human. The cameras captured every detail, the subtle glances, the slight gestures, the way each actor's voice changed slightly when speaking. There was no shouting, no dramatics, just a quiet intensity that made every word matter. The hosts did their best to maintain balance, asking questions that required thought but also humor, trying to keep the audience engaged without allowing the tension to escalate too far. And yet, even with their efforts, it was clear that this moment was unusual. This was not a segment that could be easily forgotten or ignored. Meanwhile, viewers at home began to sense something happening even before the news of the moment spread. Those watching live could feel it in the pacing of the conversation, in the slight pauses, in the way the actors' eyes sometimes lingered on one another as if silently testing boundaries. It's a rare experience to witness someone you admire acting naturally, without filters, without scripts, without the safety of prepared lines. People at home were curious, engaged, and maybe even a little anxious. Who would maintain composure? Who would back down? Or would the conversation continue, building in intensity? Even among the studio audience, reactions varied. Some were thrilled, whispering to neighbors about how unexpected this was. Others were tense, unsure if a playful debate might cross into real conflict. Yet everyone was captivated. There's something about watching skilled individuals navigate disagreement gracefully that can be mesmerizing. The audience had front row seats to the kind of human interaction that rarely happens so publicly and in real time. It was a lesson in personality, patience, and presence. By now, the conversation had moved far beyond movie roles and acting tips. It touched on personal values, life experiences, and differing approaches to success. Each actor brought decades of experience and wisdom to their statements, speaking not only from memory, but from lived experience. There was honesty in their words, a sense that this was not about winning an argument or proving a point. It was about expressing genuine perspectives, each shaped by a lifetime in the spotlight. And that honesty is what made the moment unforgettable. As the first part of the show drew to a close, the audience and viewers alike were left in awe. What had begun as a standard appearance had transformed into a rare glimpse at the human side of greatness. Two legends, each with their own history, personalities, and opinions, had sat together and spoken authentically, showing that even the most accomplished people are not always in agreement. They laughed, they paused, they considered, and they disagreed, all in a way that felt both real and riveting. For the hosts, it was a balancing act. They had to manage the flow of conversation, maintain professionalism, and ensure that no one felt uncomfortable. But for the audience, both in the studio and at home, it was a lesson in paying attention, in witnessing subtle human dynamics, and in understanding that disagreement does not have to be negative. It can be engaging, thought-provoking, and even inspiring. By the time the show went to commercial break, whispers filled the studio. Cameras had captured the tension, but also the humor and warmth that could only come from real interaction. People exchanged looks, nodded in agreement, and discussed what had just happened. Everyone understood that they had witnessed something unique. And as the screens at home faded to black for a moment, viewers were left thinking, anticipating, and eagerly waiting for the next part of the conversation, wondering how it would continue and whether it might grow even more intense, or find moments of unexpected camaraderie. In that first part of the show, something extraordinary had already occurred. Two icons whose careers spanned generations had shown that live television is unpredictable, that personalities matter, and that respect and authenticity can coexist even in moments of tension. The scene was set for what was to come, and both the studio audience and the viewers at home knew it. They had witnessed the calm before the storm, the setup for a conversation that would soon make headlines, a moment that would be replayed, discussed, and remembered as one of the rare times where television felt completely alive. And in that bright studio, under the lights with cameras rolling and audiences watching, the first part of the story of Clint Eastwood and Robert De Niro's unforgettable on-air encounter came to life, not scripted, not rehearsed, but real, human, and unforgettable. After the first part of the show, the atmosphere in the studio had changed. What had started as a friendly conversation now carried a subtle tension that could be felt by everyone present. The audience, both in the studio and at home, could sense that something unusual was unfolding. The hosts, experienced and quick on their feet, tried to keep things light, asking questions about the actors' upcoming projects and reflecting on their legendary careers. But it was clear that the conversation was about to take a sharper turn. The actors began to touch on topics beyond acting and movie sets. One started to talk about the evolution of Hollywood, how the industry had changed over the decades, and what it meant to stay true to one's craft in a world full of commercial pressures. His tone was calm, deliberate, and thoughtful. Every word seemed carefully chosen, as if he were speaking not just to the audience but to history itself. The other actor listened intently, his expression revealing a mixture of curiosity and mild impatience. He respected the first actor, of course, but he also had strong opinions and was not shy about sharing them. As the discussion progressed, the differences between the two became more noticeable. One spoke with quiet authority, drawing from years of experience and projecting a sense of stability. The other was more animated, passionate, and unafraid to challenge ideas directly. It was like watching two masterful chess players thinking several moves ahead, each observing, calculating, and choosing words with care. The host tried to bridge the gap, asking questions that would allow both perspectives to shine, but the dynamic had already shifted. The conversation was no longer simply a casual exchange, it was becoming a subtle, real-time clash of ideas. The audience in the studio noticed every nuance. Small gestures, the raising of an eyebrow, a slight tilt of the head, a pause before replying told the story more vividly than words could. People leaned forward in their seats, eager to catch every moment, aware that they were witnessing something rare. It was not tension for the sake of drama. It was a natural human reaction. Two strong personalities were expressing themselves authentically, and the result was captivating. There was a certain electricity in the air, a sense that this conversation could go in any direction. The host attempted to steer the discussion toward lighter subjects, suggesting anecdotes from movie sets or amusing behind-the-scenes stories. For a brief moment, it seemed to work. Both actors shared short stories, bringing smiles and laughter to the audience. But it was only temporary. The calm did not last long, because the two legends had different approaches to the world and different experiences that shaped their perspectives. And as any observer of human behavior would predict, those differences began to surface again, gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. It began with a small disagreement, almost trivial in nature. One actor commented on a trend in modern filmmaking, and the other offered a slightly different viewpoint. The disagreement was polite, but it carried a subtle weight. Each word seemed to matter more than usual. The audience picked up on it immediately, though the hosts tried to keep their smiles in place. There was no shouting, no anger, but the room was filled with a tension that only live television could produce. It was the kind of tension that makes people lean in, silent, waiting to see what happens next. The discussion deepened as the actors shared more personal reflections. One talked about the responsibility of actors to influence society through their roles, while the other focused on the importance of authenticity and staying true to personal beliefs, even when it conflicted with public opinion. The points were valid and both had merit, but they were also distinctly different, highlighting the contrast between the two men. The audience could feel the push and pull, the intellectual exchange that was both respectful and charged with energy. It was clear that neither was trying to dominate the conversation, but both were unwilling to compromise their views. For a moment, the host tried to inject humor, asking about funny mistakes on set or unusual experiences with co-stars. The audience chuckled politely, but the laughter was quieter than usual. People sensed that this was not just entertainment, it was a real encounter between two strong minds. The tension was not negative. It was engaging, thought-provoking, and deeply human. It was the kind of moment where viewers at home could relate. Because everyone has experienced conversations where opinions clash, even with friends or family. Watching two masters handle it with composure and intelligence was fascinating. As the conversation continued, one of the actors became more animated, emphasizing points with hand gestures and deliberate phrasing. The other remained calm, his voice measured, almost a contrast to the energy in the room. Their exchange highlighted the differences not just in opinions, but in temperament, communication style, and life approach. The audience was captivated, observing every micro-expression, every pause, every glance. It was a lesson in human interaction, showing how strong personalities can coexist in a single conversation. Even when they don't always agree, social media had already started to react, even while the show was live. Clips of the conversation, short moments of intense discussion, were being shared and analyzed. People were commenting on how unusual it was to see such authenticity from two actors who had spent decades carefully managing their public images. In a world where interviews are often scripted and rehearsed, this felt raw and unfiltered. Viewers were curious who would hold their ground, who would yield, and what would be the outcome of this subtle clash. Back in the studio, the tension was palpable but controlled. The host guided the conversation as best they could, but they also allowed space for the actors to express themselves fully. It was a delicate balance. Too much control would make the conversation feel artificial. Too little might let it slip into real conflict. But the actors handled it gracefully, each responding with respect and carefully measured words. They were professionals but also human, and the result was a dynamic that felt alive, unpredictable, and deeply engaging. The audience in the studio began to discuss quietly among themselves, exchanging whispers and glances. Some were impressed by the calm authority of one actor, some by the passionate intensity of the other. Everyone seemed to understand that they were witnessing a rare moment of human interaction at the highest level. It was not about winning or losing. It was about dialogue, the meeting of minds, and the tension that comes from genuine difference. This was a form of entertainment that went beyond movies or TV. It was real life, unfolding in front of them. At one point, one of the actors shared a story about a particularly challenging role that required deep emotional engagement. The other nodded, appreciating the dedication, but then added his own perspective, highlighting the importance of balance and personal conviction. The host tried to interject with light questions, but the exchange had taken on a life of its own. Every statement, every subtle facial expression, every pause added layers to the conversation. The audience leaned in closer, aware that this was not a typical talk show moment. There were moments of laughter, small smiles exchanged, and polite nods, but the underlying energy remained intense. The actors were not in conflict, but they were also not simply agreeing to be agreeable. Their exchange demonstrated a rare quality, respect combined with honesty. They were showing the audience that disagreement does not have to be negative or hostile. Instead, it can be engaging, thoughtful, and even inspiring. People watching at home were learning, perhaps unconsciously, how to navigate difficult conversations with dignity and intelligence. As the segment progressed, the intensity grew in a measured way. The audience could sense the shift from simple discussion to deeper, more meaningful interaction. Both actors were sharing more personal reflections, not just professional anecdotes. One spoke about lessons learned from life's challenges, the other about staying true to oneself in the face of criticism. These were universal themes, and the audience responded, connecting on a human level. The conversation was no longer just about Hollywood or movies, it was about values, experiences, and authenticity. The host guided the discussion toward its next phase, asking questions that invited both actors to reflect on each other's careers. The responses were polite, insightful, and occasionally pointed, highlighting contrasts without turning hostile. The audience appreciated the subtle tension, the way it added depth to what could have been a simple promotional interview. Everyone could see that this was a rare opportunity to witness genuine interaction between two legendary figures. each confident in their voice but willing to listen. By the end of part 2, the conversation had reached a point where anticipation hung in the air. The audience knew that this exchange was special. They had seen personalities, experience, and authenticity collide in real time, and they were eager to see how the discussion would develop. The first moments of friendly dialogue had transformed into a nuanced, intelligent clash of ideas that was compelling, educational, and emotionally engaging. The stage was set for the next phase of the conversation. Everyone in the studio and viewers at home understood that this was more than just a TV interview. It was a rare glimpse into the minds of two extraordinary individuals navigating the complexities of opinion, personality, and public scrutiny. The XE. The second part of the conversation had left a quiet tension hanging in the studio. The audience was attentive, whispering in hushed tones among themselves, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. The hosts had done their best to keep the discussion light, but it was clear that the exchange between the two legendary actors had taken on a new energy. What began as polite disagreement had evolved into a moment where every word, every glance, and every pause carried weight. The segment began with one of the actors sharing a personal story from early in his career. He spoke about a role that had tested him in unexpected ways, a film that required him to confront his own fears and insecurities. His voice was calm, reflective, and measured, giving the audience a glimpse into the depth of his experience. He talked about the pressure of performing under intense scrutiny, the challenges of living up to expectations, and the lessons learned from mistakes. The story was honest and human, drawing empathy from the viewers both in the studio and at home. The other actor listened carefully, nodding occasionally, but his expression suggested that he had a strong opinion to share. When he spoke, his voice was firmer, his words deliberate and slightly sharper in tone. He emphasized the importance of passion and conviction in every performance, arguing that true artistry often comes from pushing boundaries and speaking one's mind. The difference in delivery was striking, one calm and introspective, the other passionate and assertive. The contrast created a subtle yet palpable tension in the room that made the audience lean forward in their seats. The host tried to maintain balance, asking questions that would allow both actors to share their perspectives without escalating conflict. But the dynamic between the two guests had grown too strong to be contained by light questions or humorous interjections. The conversation naturally moved toward deeper topics: personal values, the responsibilities of public figures, and the challenges of living authentically under constant public scrutiny. Both actors had lived through decades of fame and criticism, and their words carried the weight of experience. The audience could feel it. This was no ordinary television moment. As the discussion intensified, one actor made a point about the evolving nature of Hollywood, pointing out that some modern films prioritize spectacle over substance. He spoke with quiet authority, using examples from his long career to illustrate how storytelling had changed over the years. The other actor responded immediately, respectfully but firmly, arguing that art must reflect the times and that experimentation, even if controversial, was essential for growth. The exchange was polite, yet the intensity in their voices hinted at the undercurrent of disagreement. It was a rare and fascinating glimpse into the minds of two individuals who had both shaped and adapted to the changing world around them. The audience began to react in subtle ways. There were small gasps at certain points, whispers of, "Did he really just say that?" and nods of understanding as both actors expressed perspectives that were relatable on a human level. The excitement was not about drama or conflict, it was about authenticity. People watching could sense that these men were speaking from their hearts, not from a script. And because of that authenticity, every word seemed more significant, every pause more meaningful. It was as if the viewers were part of a conversation they had no right to hear, yet couldn't look away from. Social media was already buzzing. Clips of brief exchanges were being shared, and viewers debated who had made the stronger point, who had handled themselves with more composure, and which perspective felt more convincing. The episode was quickly becoming more than just a television interview. It was a cultural moment. Audiences were captivated because they recognized something rare, live interaction between two icons, who were not afraid to challenge each other respectfully, revealing both strength and vulnerability. At one point, the conversation shifted toward personal responsibility and public perception. One actor explained how fame often brought scrutiny that was difficult to manage, sharing how he had learned to navigate criticism without letting it affect his work or personal life. His words were thoughtful and deliberate, filled with insights that only someone who had spent decades in the spotlight could share. The other actor responded with equal intensity, talking about the need to speak up and stand by one's beliefs, even if it meant facing backlash. The contrast in viewpoints was compelling because both were valid, yet they approached the same issue from very different perspectives. The tension continued to rise, not through anger or aggression, but through the power of intellect and lived experience. Every word mattered, every gesture was noted, and every pause added gravity to the conversation. The audience in the studio shifted in their seats, drawn in by the subtle battle of ideas playing out before them. There was a rhythm to the exchange: push, pause, reflect, respond, that made the discussion feel alive and unpredictable. It was no longer about movies or fame. It was about understanding, conviction, and the human capacity to communicate across differences. One particularly memorable moment came when one actor shared a story about a disagreement with a director on set. He spoke about how challenging it was to balance personal integrity with the demands of the production. The other actor nodded, then offered his own example, emphasizing that challenges often reveal true character and creativity. The audience was silent for a moment, absorbing the depth of the exchange. It was a lesson in humility and courage, showing that even legends are constantly learning, adapting, and navigating difficult situations. The hosts interjected briefly, trying to lighten the mood, but it was clear that this segment had taken on a life of its own. The conversation was no longer about controlling the narrative. It was about allowing two intelligent, experienced individuals to explore complex ideas openly. The energy in the studio shifted from polite entertainment to genuine engagement. Everyone present felt they were witnessing a rare human experience, a live demonstration of dialogue, conflict, and mutual respect. Even small details mattered. A pause before a reply, a slight smile, a hand gesture — these nuances carried meaning that words alone could not convey. The audience noticed them, and so did viewers at home. Television often relies on drama and spectacle, but this moment was different. It was subtle, natural, and entirely human. The clash of personalities was not loud or confrontational. It was quiet, intellectual, and emotionally engaging, which made it even more compelling. As the discussion progressed, both actors showed moments of humor and self-reflection, which helped balance the intensity. They laughed at minor mistakes, acknowledged each other's insights, and even complimented each other's accomplishments. But underneath the smiles and polite gestures, the tension remained. The audience could sense that both men were fully present, fully engaged, and fully committed to expressing their perspectives honestly. This combination of authenticity, respect, and intensity made the segment unforgettable. At several points, one actor would make a subtle, almost understated point that drew visible reactions from the other. The pause before the reply, the slight furrow of the brow, the thoughtful nod — all of it added drama without theatrics. The audience leaned in, captivated by the natural flow of conversation, recognizing that they were witnessing something few people get to see: a genuine exchange between two masters of their craft, each unafraid to reveal both their convictions and their vulnerability. The hosts did their best to guide the discussion toward conclusion, but it was clear that this moment could not be rushed. The audience remained attentive, captivated by the unfolding interaction. People at home were tweeting, commenting, and sharing clips of the segment, analyzing every word and every glance. The studio audience was equally engaged, sensing that what they were seeing was rare and important. The energy in the room was palpable, a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and anticipation. Toward the end of the segment, one actor made a quiet but pointed, Remark about the challenges of maintaining integrity in an industry that often prioritizes profit over artistry. The other responded almost immediately, calmly but firmly, emphasizing the importance of adaptability and understanding different perspectives. The exchange was brief but powerful, and the audience responded audibly, some with gasps, others with murmurs of appreciation. It was a turning point, a moment that clearly showed that both actors were not just legends in their field, but also deeply human beings with thoughtful, considered opinions. By the time the segment concluded, the tension had reached a peak that was both respectful and compelling. The audience had witnessed an exchange that was intellectually stimulating, emotionally engaging, and entirely human. There was no winner or loser, no dramatic showdown, just two remarkable individuals sharing, challenging, and responding to one another with honesty and respect. For the viewers, this was a lesson in conversation, empathy, and the power of authentic dialogue. Even as the cameras cut to a commercial break, the energy remained in the studio. People whispered, replaying moments in their minds and speculating about what would come next. Social media buzzed with clips and commentary, spreading the moment far beyond the television screen. It was clear that this episode would be remembered not for scripted interviews or carefully planned moments, but for the rare. By the time the show reached the fourth part of the segment, the energy in the studio was almost electric. What had begun as a simple conversation about movies, acting, and Hollywood had evolved into something far more compelling. The audience in the studio sat on the edge of their seats, whispering among themselves, sensing that a moment they would remember for years was approaching. The hosts, aware of the growing intensity, tried to maintain calm, asking questions that seemed neutral on the surface but which allowed the two legendary actors to speak freely. The discussion had gradually shifted from professional anecdotes to personal beliefs and life experiences. One actor spoke about the challenges of staying true to oneself in a constantly changing world, reflecting on the pressures of fame, the judgments of critics, and the expectations of fans. His voice was calm, firm, and introspective, carrying the weight of decades of experience. Every word seemed carefully chosen, not just to share a perspective but to invite understanding. The other actor, equally experienced, listened intently. His posture was relaxed but alert, his eyes steady and sharp. When he spoke, his words carried an energy that demanded attention. He shared his thoughts about authenticity in art, about the importance of speaking one's mind, and about the responsibility of public figures to be honest, even when it might cause controversy. His tone was measured yet passionate, and the contrast between the two actors' styles was both fascinating and engaging. The hosts attempted to navigate the conversation carefully, offering light questions and humorous observations to diffuse the growing intensity. But it was clear that the dynamic between the two actors had reached a point where subtle tension could no longer be hidden. Each word, each pause, and each glance now carried significance. The audience felt the weight of the interaction, knowing that they were witnessing something rare, two great minds, two distinct personalities engaging in a live, unfiltered exchange of ideas. The conversation soon took a sharper turn when one actor made a quiet, pointed comment about trends in the film industry. He suggested that some modern projects focus too much on spectacle and not enough on substance, hinting at the importance of meaningful storytelling. The other actor, nodding at first, then leaned forward slightly, his expression showing a mix of surprise and determination. He responded immediately, calmly but firmly, challenging the idea with a perspective that emphasized creativity, risk-taking, and the evolution of art over time. The audience was instantly drawn in. Some gasped softly, others whispered in amazement. There was a sense of suspense in the air, a feeling that this exchange could escalate or take an unexpected turn at any moment. The hosts tried to guide the discussion, asking questions that encouraged both actors to elaborate, but the underlying tension had become the focal point of the segment. Every reaction, every micro-expression, and every subtle change in tone was amplified under the studio lights, creating a live, interactive drama that captivated everyone present. At one point, One actor shared a story about a disagreement he had experienced early in his career, describing a situation where staying true to his values had required courage and resilience. His words were calm, reflective, and personal. The other actor listened, nodded, and then shared his own story, highlighting a time when he had faced criticism for being outspoken and unafraid to express his opinion. Both stories were different, but they carried a common thread: honesty, integrity, and the courage to face challenges head-on. The audience responded quietly at first, absorbing the depth of the conversation. Then, as the exchange grew more intense, reactions became more noticeable. There were murmurs of appreciation, gentle applause, and a few audible gasps as the actors challenged each other's ideas respectfully but firmly. The host continued to mediate, but they also seemed aware that they were watching something special unfold, a moment where authenticity, experience, and human emotion converged in real time. Then, it happened. The moment that would be remembered long after the episode aired. One actor, with his calm, deliberate style, made a subtle yet sharp comment that directly challenged a statement the other had made moments before. The delivery was quiet but precise, the kind of remark that carries weight not because of volume but because of clarity and conviction. The studio fell silent for a brief instant, as if everyone were holding their breath. Even the hosts paused, momentarily caught by the sudden intensity. The other actor's reaction was immediate and visible. His eyes widened slightly, his posture shifted, and a brief pause followed. He looked at his counterpart with a mixture of surprise and acknowledgement, realizing that the comment had hit its mark. There was no yelling, no shouting, just a subtle, almost imperceptible clash of ideas, and yet the effect was profound. The audience, both in the studio and at home, could feel it. This was not a scripted moment. This was real. Whispers spread through the studio. The hosts tried to resume their questions, adding humor and light-hearted commentary, but the atmosphere had already changed. The actors, fully aware of the audience's attention, continued the exchange, each speaking with clarity, intelligence, and a quiet intensity that demanded respect. The energy in the room was palpable. It was a mix of tension, curiosity, and admiration, the kind of engagement that comes only when viewers realize they are seeing something unfiltered, authentic, and rare. Social media erupted. Clips of the exchange were shared within minutes, with viewers debating the meaning, the impact, and the subtle power dynamics at play. Fans analyzed every gesture, every pause, and every glance, trying to understand not just what was said, but how it was said. For a live television moment, the attention was extraordinary. The episode had moved beyond entertainment. It had become a live demonstration of human interaction at its most compelling, capturing respect, disagreement, and thoughtfulness all at once, back in the studio. The tension began to ease slightly, but only in terms of volume, not impact. The actors had shifted from direct challenge to a more reflective exchange, considering each other's perspectives while still standing firm in their own. It was a remarkable display of communication, showing that disagreement does not have to be hostile, and that strong personalities can coexist in a single conversation without diminishing one another. Audience members leaned forward in their seats, captivated by every nuance. They noticed subtle gestures, a slight nod, a thoughtful frown, a hand movement that emphasized a point. Each movement added layers of meaning to the words being spoken. The hosts, recognizing the importance of the moment, gave space while guiding the conversation carefully, allowing the actors to navigate the delicate balance between intensity and respect. As the segment continued, the actors shared more personal reflections. One spoke about the weight of expectations in his career, the constant pressure to perform, and the difficulty of balancing personal life with public scrutiny. The other responded with insights on perseverance, resilience, and the importance of staying true to oneself in the face of criticism. The dialogue was intense but respectful, engaging the audience in a way that few television interviews ever do. The quiet tension was punctuated by occasional laughter and smiles, which reminded everyone that the interaction, though intense, was not negative. It was human, relatable, and emotionally engaging. Viewers at home could sense the depth of experience and thought behind every word. This was not performance. This was reality. And in reality, the audience realized even legends have moments of surprise, challenge, and reflection. Toward the end of the segment, one actor made a closing point that seemed to resonate with the audience. His words were calm, powerful, and thoughtful, emphasizing the importance of integrity, authenticity, and empathy. The other actor responded with a measured agreement, adding his perspective on adaptability and the value of understanding differing viewpoints. The exchange concluded not with confrontation, but with recognition, a subtle acknowledgement that, despite differences, mutual respect could exist. The hosts guided the conversation to a close, summarizing the key points while maintaining the excitement and engagement in the studio. The audience applauded, some leaning back in their seats in awe, others quietly reflecting on what they had just witnessed. Social media buzzed even more, with viewers replaying clips, sharing insights, and expressing amazement at the authenticity and intensity of the exchange. By the end of Part 4, it was clear that this episode would be remembered for years. The shocking on-air moment had not been loud or aggressive, it had been subtle, intelligent, and human. The audience had witnessed a rare collision of personalities, experience and conviction, all handled with respect and authenticity. It was a reminder that live television, when it captures real human interaction, can be profoundly engaging and unforgettable. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the segment ended, but the energy remained. Audience members discussed in whispers, still captivated, still processing what had happened. Viewers at home continued to analyze, debate, and replay the moment, understanding that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The episode had transformed from a routine talk show appearance into a live study of personality, communication, and human connection, and in that moment, one thing was certain: the story of this exchange, the tension, the surprise. The show had ended, but the impact of the conversation lingered in the air like a quiet hum that refused to fade. The studio audience sat for a few moments, still absorbing what they had witnessed. What had started as a simple talk show segment had become a rare moment in television history, one that would be discussed, replayed, and remembered for years to come. Everyone in the room knew that they had seen something extraordinary, a real human interaction between two of the most iconic actors in Hollywood, a meeting of minds that had combined respect, intensity, and authenticity in a way few people ever get to see. As the audience left their seats and made their way toward the exits, whispers filled the air. People recounted specific moments, gestures, and words that had struck them. Some were amazed by the calm authority of one actor, others by the passionate energy of the other. But nearly everyone agreed on one point: the conversation had been genuine. It had not been scripted, staged, or rehearsed. It was real, unfiltered, and human, and that was what made it unforgettable. Backstage, the atmosphere was a mixture of relief and excitement. The hosts quietly congratulated themselves on managing the live discussion, aware that the exchange could have gone in many unpredictable directions. Staff members exchanged knowing glances, acknowledging that they had just witnessed a moment that would go down in television history. The actors themselves, though calm on the surface, carried the quiet satisfaction of having spoken honestly, having challenged and respected each other at the same time. They were professionals, yes, but also human, and they had navigated a high-pressure situation with skill and dignity. In the days following the episode, social media erupted. Clips of the exchange went viral almost immediately. Fans and viewers dissected the conversation, analyzing the words, the pauses, the gestures, and the expressions. People debated the points made, discussed the philosophies shared, and speculated about what might have happened off-camera. The discussion transcended the show itself. It became a cultural moment, a topic that everyone wanted to engage with. Articles were written, talk shows referenced the moment, and hashtags trended as viewers expressed amazement at the authenticity of the interaction. Critics, too, took note. Film analysts and television commentators praised the actors for their poise, intelligence, and integrity. They highlighted how unusual it was to see such a raw, Human exchange between two people who had spent decades in the public eye. Many noted that the moment served as a reminder that disagreement does not have to be hostile, and that differing opinions, when expressed respectfully, can be deeply engaging and enlightening. The conversation had become a case study in communication, one that audiences could learn from and admire. Viewers at home reflected on what they had seen. Some felt inspired, thinking about their own experiences with conflict and dialogue. Others were struck by the level of professionalism and humanity displayed by the actors, realizing that even people who have achieved legendary status still face challenges in expressing themselves honestly while maintaining respect for others. For many, the episode was more than entertainment. It was a lesson in empathy, understanding, and the power of listening as well as speaking. The actors themselves, when asked about the moment in later interviews, spoke carefully and thoughtfully. Neither framed the exchange as a confrontation, but both acknowledged that it had been a significant and meaningful interaction. One mentioned that television, when done well, can capture moments of truth that transcend the screen. The other emphasized that respecting someone's perspective, even when you disagree, is one of the most valuable skills anyone can have. Both in life and in art, their reflections reinforce the idea that authenticity and respect could coexist. Even under intense scrutiny. In Hollywood, the story spread quickly. Colleagues, friends, and industry professionals discussed the episode, praising the actors for handling the situation with grace and intelligence. The moment became an example of how experienced professionals can express strong opinions while maintaining dignity. It highlighted the value of preparation, thoughtfulness, and empathy, showing that even in high-pressure environments, genuine human connection is possible. Television producers and talk show hosts also took note. They recognized that live, unscripted moments like this could captivate audiences far more than scripted segments or carefully planned promotions. It was a reminder that the power of television often lies not in perfection but in authenticity. The episode set a standard for future interviews, encouraging hosts to allow guests to speak freely while maintaining a safe and respectful environment. The audience, both in the studio and at home, continued to discuss the moment for weeks. Friends talked about it, families replayed clips, and online forums debated every aspect of the exchange. People were drawn not only to the personalities of the actors but to the ideas they had shared. Topics such as integrity, authenticity, artistic expression, and public responsibility became part of everyday conversation, showing that a single television segment could spark meaningful reflection and dialogue far beyond the studio walls. Even months later, the episode remained a point of reference. Film students studied the actors' communication styles, looking at how calm authority and passionate conviction could interact in productive ways. Leadership seminars used clips to demonstrate conflict resolution and respectful dialogue. Fans shared their favorite moments repeatedly, marveling at how two individuals, both powerful in their own ways, could challenge and inspire each other without diminishing either party. The hosts of the show reflected on the moment as well. They acknowledged that managing live television is never easy, but moments like this reminded them why they do the work. Television has the power to capture humanity in its most compelling form: moments of honesty, tension, understanding, and revelation. They realized that their role was not just to entertain, but to provide a platform where such moments could unfold naturally, allowing audiences to witness the richness of human interaction. Meanwhile, the two actors continued their respective projects, but the episode became part of their ongoing legacy. Interviews, retrospectives, and profiles frequently mentioned the on-air exchange, praising the professionalism, intelligence, and humanity displayed. The incident demonstrated that even when public figures have strong opinions and differing perspectives, they can communicate in ways that are both compelling and respectful. It reminded the world that disagreement can be beautiful when handled with thoughtfulness and care. The episode also left a lasting impression on the viewers. Many reported feeling inspired to approach their own conversations differently, to listen more carefully, to express opinions more clearly, and to respect others' perspectives even when they disagreed. The conversation between the two actors had transcended television. It had become a lesson in life, showing that communication is not just about talking but about understanding, reflecting, and engaging honestly with another person. In the studio, months later, staff would occasionally recall the energy of that day. They remembered the subtle shifts in posture, the intense focus in the actor's eyes, and the quiet power of the exchange. It had been a moment of shared humanity, where preparation met spontaneity, and where intellect, emotion, and respect combined to create something truly memorable. For them, and for everyone who watched, the experience was unforgettable. In the broader world, the episode sparked conversations about the role of authenticity in media. Journalists, critics, and fans praised the actors for showing that even in a world dominated by image and perception, honesty and integrity still matter. The moment became a reference point for how public figures can communicate effectively, even under pressure, and how meaningful dialogue can leave a lasting impression on audiences. Ultimately, the lasting impact of the episode was not about who had made the stronger point or who had been more persuasive. It was about witnessing a real human connection, two extraordinary individuals engaging with each other openly, respectfully, and thoughtfully. It was a reminder that, no matter how famous or powerful someone may be, authenticity, respect, and empathy are timeless values that resonate with everyone. By the time the story settled into the collective memory of the public, the episode had achieved something rare. It had turned a routine television segment into a moment of cultural significance. It had sparked conversations, inspired reflection, and reminded viewers that real-life interaction, honesty, and understanding are far more compelling than drama or spectacle. The on-air clash, once tense and surprising, had become a symbol of how disagreement and respect can coexist, leaving a legacy that went far beyond entertainment. Even now, years later, people still recall that episode with awe. Clips are shared, conversations are revisited, and the lessons it taught about human interaction remain relevant. The story of that day serves as a timeless reminder that television, at its best, can capture the essence of humanity, the courage to speak, the wisdom to listen, and the grace to respect differences. And so, the episode ended not with shouting, not with anger, but with understanding, reflection, and the quiet acknowledgement of shared humanity. The audience left with more than just memories of famous faces. They left with an experience, a lesson, and a story that would stay with T.